Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review, and in this video I'm going to review Worldwide Torture by Jazmin Bean. This is her debut full-length album, which is basically an extended version of an EP that she did last year with the exact same name. Jazmin Bean is one of those new artists that has come in the pop rap scene that basically tries to fuse many other elements together, making for a more aggressive approach. There are some elements of alternative metal to this thing, some elements of industrial and electro-industrial music to the sound, but it's mostly one of those cases where we have an artist going into a more pop-oriented sound but having a much edgier content behind it. Jazmin is an artist that plays a lot with the image, with some extremely eccentric video clips filled with so many vivid colors, and some of the aesthetics and the childish outfits shows that she has certainly taken some influence from artists like Melanie Martinez, for example, having all of those cute outfits and aesthetics and then turning them into something more extreme, more menacing, and definitely with a much more edgy attitude. Unlike Melanie Martinez though, like I said, Jazmin Bean goes into some more aggressive elements of sound and production, kind of reminding me some of the later stuff we would see in some pop releases. In the case of Jazmin Bean though, I wouldn't say that all of those elements are combined that much well together. I don't find that there is really that much of a good connection from like the metal parts to the more pop stuff. Like some of the structures and some of the pacing really feels off in multiple occasions, and there are really few occasions where we actually see this more aggressive nature. It's like it comes into some certain occasions and then immediately disappears. The track that feels the least being the case is the self-titled one, Worldwide Torture, which in my opinion makes for one of the better moments over here. It's definitely one of the highlights, as I feel that it has a really interesting hook to it and the overall sound and production feels kind of nice, and I feel that the way it's structured, the overall pacing feels on point. But for the most part we're basically talking about another typical pop artist that in my opinion doesn't really have something that much new to offer to the scene. So for me, Jazmin Bean is an artist where I see the biggest emphasis being on the image. When it comes to the music, we're talking about some quite standard stuff, and even with some of those metal portions, for the most part they sound extremely bland, and the production on those occasions will not feel that much well done. Like I said, the only exception I feel is with the track Worldwide Torture, which is definitely one of the more intense moments over here. And even vocally doesn't have something special. Her voice is really just basic standard stuff that you would hear in like pop singles. There's nothing really that much new to it. Now this album contains every single track that was on her previous EP, with just one change up in the track listing, and then we have mostly moments that were released before as singles with video clips, and we only have 2 to 3 tracks that were not previously released and that were meant to be part of this full-length album. So obviously, as you can guess, for the most part this thing is a bit of a mess. There is not that much of a connection with the songs. It mostly feels like a compilation of basically mostly everything Jazmin Bean has done up until this point. Now out of the EP, I would say that the best track is Worldwide Torture, which I don't even find that it's that much of an amazing song. Oh, and probably Saccharine, which is a track that has a bit of a cohesion to it. It has an interesting instrumental, but it's mostly a really forgettable song. With the rest of the track listing though, I found that the EP was kind of crap and making for some of the worst moments in this full-length album. For example, with the track Princess Castle featuring Cotontail, I cannot stand the vocal delivery on this thing. I don't find that the vocals work that well with this whole thing, and it has such a lackluster and basic and generic instrumental to it. I really don't see this track working that much. I find that the structure for the most part is really all over the place. But for me, actually, the worst track over here has to be Hello Kitty. Like, this track is such a painful attempt on trying to be so many different things at once and failing. And it's actually the shortest moments over here, going for 2.5 minutes, but somehow it's the biggest mess out of everything in this album. The mixing on this thing, the metal portion sounds awful, the metal part sounds like crap, and for some reason the vocals are much higher into the mix, making for such a weird mixing. And also the transitions on this thing don't work at all. The way it shifts genres from one portion to the next makes no sense, and I'm like, how did we even end up with this? This was such a mess of a track and I didn't really enjoy it. Little Lamb is also the closer of the album and it makes for such a forgettable closure. It goes more on like the standards of a pop ballad. It tries to have some more epic elements of orchestration over here, but for the most part it's just extremely forgettable. So the EP by themselves was certainly quite underwhelming, but I think that having the rest of the album, we actually get some better stuff from Jazmin Bean. I feel that the track Yandere is one of the better moments over here. The instrumental is kind of basic and generic, however I feel that the hook on this track in particular is really infectious, and it's also one of the few occasions in this album where I feel that it successfully creates a dark aesthetic. For me, the biggest highlight of this album by far is the track Monster Truck featuring Zheani. This is the one track that manages to be more aggressive, be quite cohesive, and have a better sense of production. It's one of those moments that works. I like the instrumental on this thing, I like the deliveries, the way it's structured and the pacing makes so much sense over here, and there are multiple elements that I feel that are nicely combined together. Also, Zheani kills it on this track. She has an aggressive delivery over here that fits, and it's really much needed in a project and a track like this. And for me, this is pretty much basically where the highlights end. After this point, we get some pretty average and forgettable stuff. Like with the track Warzone Urchin, I think that it has some interesting moments to it. I like when it gets into this more alternative metal side, but it's one of those occasions that it lasts so little, and I don't get that much of it as I would prefer to. But there are also some weak elements of production and mixing to this track, in my opinion. There is one of the newer tracks over here, which is Before the Fight, which feels like such an unnecessary song. It's one of those tracks that I don't like being put in an album like this, because this is mostly like a piano ballad and it's a long one. It's the longest track over here, going for 5 minutes. Now it tries to have some more epic moments with those big grand orchestral elements and also some kind of droning noise passages, but for the most part, as far as it has some really intense and quite loud and epic moments, this track doesn't work at all. The simple vocal delivery doesn't really work or providing that much to the song. And yeah, it was definitely one of the most underwhelming moments over here. It was an extremely boring and forgettable track. The other previously teased track was Super Slaughter, which I find that it has a lackluster instrumental to it. There is a rapping portion to this thing that is kind of sloppy and I don't find it working that well, but for the most part it's a really short track with not that much to it. It was quite average. Finally, we have the track I'm a Slave for You, which is one of the previously unreleased moments, and it's actually a track that I enjoyed quite a bit. I feel that it has an interesting instrumental to it in just a few occasions, and it also has one of the better hooks, but for the most part it's another pretty standard and a bit unimaginative song. So yeah, I find that this debut of Jazmin Bean is slightly underwhelming. I certainly see the potential in some occasion, but I feel that Jazmin Bean is an artist that relies more on her image, because musically we're talking about some pretty generic stuff that we've seen other artists just handling in a much better way. And even if she attempts fusing more sounds and genres together, in my opinion it just stays in the attempt, because what we get as a final result in this album is pretty average. I'm going to give Worldwide Torture a 5 out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.